Welcome to MoveMind Podcast. My guest today is yet again the familiar face of Mr. Dave Allanson from Foundations Performance, up north there in Sheffield, lad. Yeah, pleasure to have you on the show, Dave. Thanks for coming back on, and yeah, happy New Year to you, good sir.
Yeah, thank you, dude. You too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, pleasure, absolute pleasure, man. We always have good chats on and offline anyway. So yeah, let's get stuck into it. The first thing I wanted to ask you, Dave, considering we've just broken into 2023, is give us an update for me, for people listening, for people that follow you. What's cracking for 2023? What have you got lined up? What cool stuff are you working on?
So at the minute, I've got the next intake of Navigating the Grey Area is going to be at the end of January, and the price is going to go up. So there'll be the original price for a couple of weeks, or potentially just a week at this stage, and then after that, it's going to be more expensive because I've had sat down and did the maths on it and realised that it probably needed to be just a little bit more than it is. And then the new stuff, I've got what you may have noticed me doing in the last week or so is tagging stuff with Get Strong, Roll More. And that's a program that I want to release in the next couple of months, so the first quarter of 2023. Because I've had a few people who've wanted to work with me in person and haven't been able to afford it, or have wanted to work with me, but they're too far away. And then the like remote coaching is just a little bit too expensive, or not quite the level of, they don't need that level of support. So that's the plan, is to release that, and it's going to be quite a straightforward program, no frills, no bullshit. It's just going to keep updating each month. It's going to be one of those rolling programs, I think, at the moment, and yeah, go from there.
Yeah, nice, mate. I like that. I like that title. That's great. That's exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah, exactly. Because I just think, like, there's so much, as I'm sure we're going to get into. There's so much bullshit in strength and conditioning around grappling, particularly like in America. Fuck me, man. There's so much just nonsense from people, and they make it all sound more complex than it needs to be. And that's not to like detract from the role of a coach and the fact that you need to be good at what you do, but at its bare bones, there's some pretty straightforward principles that grapplers can follow, and jiu-jitsu in particular, I think you can benefit from a much more straightforward form of programming than, say, a sprinter or even an MMA fighter, where things start to become a bit more. There's a few more plates you need to spin that don't necessarily need to be spun for jiu-jitsu, but we can get into all of that. So,
Yeah, we shall. Oh, believe us, we shall.
what about yourself before I'm rude?
Oh, mate, yeah, I got a few things lined up too. Yeah, skinny grappler is
Yeah,
obviously the phrase of this year. No more skinny grappler. Again, similar, helping grapplers sort of get rid of the complication around what it takes to go up a weight class or put on muscle. So similar, going to market in March with that. Very excited with that. Put a lot of hours into it, thinking about it, testing it, all that kind of stuff. So similar to you, Dave, on a pragmatism front, really, what's going to be useful for people, all the bollocks aside, because
yeah.
yeah, we're going to wade through the bollocks later. So that's the first little bit, and then beyond that, I've actually got some no-gi competitions coming up, sub onlys. Yeah, I got a bit, yeah, disheartened, maybe disillusioned, just put off by IBJJF bollocks in the competition scene before Christmas in the gi. And I've only been doing the gi for about a year, but I wanted to.
What do you mean they are the pinnacle of fairness? How dare you suggest that there is anything untoward happening in the only sport where you've got to pay to compete, even if, anyway, yeah, no, I won't get into that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother show. We can go.
Yeah.
We can do the slay the IBJJF in a whole nother show. So
Oh,
we've got some no-gi comps coming up instead. I'm going to go back to some
cool.
no-gi for this first little bit. Yeah, a few sub-only comps.
Before I forget, there is the first jiu-jitsu competition in Sheffield in 20 plus years.
No
Um,
way.
Let me just have a look before I get the date wrong. It's near the start of March. Yeah, one of the guys that I have trained with in the past, and I trained with at the open mat that I go to, called Chris, who is a lovely bloke. Yeah, 25th of March. Is putting on the first competition we've had since I've been training here. And people have talked about it. No one's really done it. and it's going to be a no-gi sub only, so you might be interested.
Oh, amazing! I'll definitely check it out.
But yeah, if you, it would be lovely if you come up. You can come and visit. It'd be nice.
Yeah, nice.
Um,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I've actually sponsored that one because I just think, oh, it sounds like really wanky, but what I mean is, I sponsored it because I think it's cool that it's happening. Like,
Yeah,
it's awesome that someone's put something on in Sheffield, and it's a bit of an embarrassment for us that nothing happens here. We've got the English Institute of Sport, and no one's really taken advantage of that building. So it's really cool that Chris is doing that. So yeah, there you go. If you want to find it on Instagram, it's called Steel City Combat Sports. Or hang on, I might have missed part of it. Steel City Combat Sports Events. There you go.
Steel
Just cutting it off on
City.
the screen.
All right, Steel City. I'm going to come and have a look. That sounds fun. I like that grassroots though popping up. I think the beauty of especially sub only competition scene is that it's so young, and it reminds me very much of like pop up sort of DIY music shows and gigs, you know, out people's garages, and that kind of punk vibe to it, where it's like there's a lot of room to make sick competitions that are a bit, you know, off piste to the normal, clinical, boring, sterile ones that we kind of get so often with like IBJJF style. There's so much room for creativity there. I love it when people take the initiative to just try and boot something up. You see them popping up all over the place now, especially these like live stream ones. I've noticed these like
Well, like Intergrapple, for example.
Yeah. It's cool, and I think it's wicked. I think that's what's gonna take us forward, isn't it? And get more eyes on the removed jacket, naked wrestling / no-gi that we that we do. People are like, "What is going on?" But yeah, I'm done with the gi for the first few months. I'll come back to it in the summer.
I've gone the other way, mate. I've been doing. I mean, I train once a week, but I've been doing no gi for ages, and I suck. My game does not suit no gi at all. So it's been a steep learning curve, and then gone back in the gi, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was all right in the gi. I could actually do things. Like my game works. All the things that I naturally gravitate to actually pay off it. But I'm sure people will say that's because I'm an unathletic, untechnical idiot. And I just like pinning people to the floor with the gi. But it's nice to have the options now compared to the level of competitions even when I first started. Like it's grown up a lot. I think the sport in the last couple of years in terms of people getting involved and putting stuff on themselves and realizing they don't need to wait for someone else to do it.
Yeah, 100%. You don't. This illusion that there's like one authority in jiu-jitsu rule sets is bollocks. There's so many to choose from. But people get sucked into that. They're like, oh no, how could I ever compete with like an IBJJF tournament? It's like, you're not trying to. This is a completely different angle to the sport, which is arguably way closer to what it was made for, which was basically like dismembering people and choking people out. It's like, let's do that then, let's facilitate that. So yeah, I'm excited. I think 2023 is going to be a great grappling year, providing it doesn't get taken over by these fucking snake oil salesmen, which just seem to be talking about Instagram conspiracies. I think these guys are out to fuck with me. They're out there to ruin my day. Like there's so many of them, and just my feed is just getting, oh, follow this guy. Yeah, follow this guy.
That's because you engage with them and they don't block you.
Yes, because you have a good track record, don't you, of getting blocked. Now, why would you want to block Dave from Foundation Performance? Like, why on earth could you get provoked so bad into
probably because
blocked?
my opening salvo was using what's her name? I can't think of the singer anyway, but the line in the song was, "What kind of fuckery is this?" Not really open, even rational debate there, but
Strong opener.
Yeah, that really seemed to get his back up. But...
I think they call that a neg, don't they?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
So for those that don't know who we're talking about, when we should give a little bit of context there. So Dave is a heathen when it comes to Instagram because he will open people's DMs with something like, "What sort of fuckery is this?" and just launch straight onto the attack. So who was it, Dave, and how did this come about?
It's our old friend Elite BJJ Strength. It came about actually because something that you posted. I wasn't really aware of it, and I probably should have done a little bit of research on his page before he blocked me, for my own amusement. But it's just Joel Seedman bullshit. 90-degree eccentric isometrics. Oh look, if you squat this, and it's like a dumbbell that charitably weighs 40 kilos, let's say, and like heavy goblet squats aren't to be laughed at, but at the same time, he's talking about these like enormous systemic benefits that you're going to get from this, and it's like that what you're saying in terms of the benefit you're going to get from the weight that you're slinging around is bullshit. I don't care how long you could sit there for 10 seconds with it there. It's not going to elicit the same thing as a 220 kilo split squat, 10-second eccentric. And I think this was the bit that I didn't really get across very well to him because I was trying to get his back up and just laughing at him. But the thing that he was pointing out and the thing that he immediately came back at me for was he called me weak and all my clients weak. Well, I'm like, whatever. I don't really mind all of that. But the crux of what I was saying was that the weight he was using in the way that he was using it wasn't heavy enough to do the things he's claiming it's going to do. So it looks lovely on Instagram. He gets to look like, oh, look how strong he is. And we see it with Joel Seedman when he like, you seen the one where he holds the safety bar and he like, it's got a weight on it and he rotates it like he's a train driver. Yeah. So there's an amazing, yeah. And he goes, and does his like little Seedman noise. So someone, and I can't remember who it is, but someone else brilliantly took that reel and remixed it. And it was just them watching him and going, oh, okay. And then they loaded up the bar and did it themselves and just literally went, like, this isn't doing anything.
Yeah, totally.
And that's my issue with it, is it's all smoke and mirrors to make you look tough. And then his complaint to me was then like, you're really weak and look how much, he kept asking me, how much do you squat? And I was like, on the one hand, I'd like to tell you so you can just fuck off. If he wants to know, I'm back squat 170 kilos for all that matters in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
But he was like, oh, well, if you held this in the eccentric isometric position at 90 degrees for, what was it, like 6 seconds or some arbitrary number that he'd come up with, I had to do the maths on it, but it was somewhere between like 200 kilos and 100, it was like 130 to 190 or 130 to 200 kilos. You'll know how it feels. And I was like, that's exactly my point. You're there holding baby weight. That's not 130 kilos in your hands, pal. That's 40 kilos at best because it's a tiny little dumper.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't engage with him on that and just made fun of him and asked him questions, and he just got snottier and snottier and started boasting about how much money he made. And I can send you the messages,
brilliant! Oh, I'd love to know how much money he's fucking made.
$10,000 a month allegedly. I don't know how many of those are US and how many of those are imaginary, but he claims $10,000 a night. $10,000 a month, because I asked him how he slept at night putting out shit content like that. So yeah, that was my second statement. Probably not all that.
Okay, this goes deeper, Mr. Allanson. This is very interesting.
But I've come from a different profession. I've come from teaching, and I just don't have time for all this fucking media nonsense. Like, if you're not going to be honest, then I don't see the point in being nice to you. Now, people get this a little confused, and I think sometimes it all turns into a bit of, oh, why is everyone being spicy with each other? I don't mean belittle people if they don't know anything. There's nothing worse than people who gatekeep strength and conditioning information, or gatekeep the gym, or gatekeep jiu-jitsu, and like, oh, you can't roll with us, like all that sort of bollocks. But if someone is working within a field and should know better, then I don't think you need to be particularly polite to them. You can choose how rude you want to be. That's your personal decision. But coming from teaching, I think if you're teaching, which is what coaching is, you have a moral responsibility to make sure that that thing you provide is good and solid and sensible and thoughtful. And therefore you have, and for me, that's moral, and maybe it isn't for other people, but that's just the way I am. And if you don't provide something that's of a high enough quality, or at least meets a minimum standard, then how dare you charge money for it? Like, imagine spunking, what's it, $180 or whatever it is on that ridiculous. What's that you posted it, that ludicrous imaginary program he'd written for an athlete that doesn't exist, that's got like, you train 6 days a week, and on this day you run, and this day you do that. You'd buy that, get 2 weeks in and go, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Right, you would.
And then he's laughing all the way to the bank. And I just don't think that's morally right. And perhaps some of it is to do with that sort of entrepreneurial, um, like make it however you can, like how big is the fight and the dog in the fight and all that kind of shit that surrounds American capitalism. That while it will produce fantastic businesses and like Keir Wenham Flat is an excellent example of someone who's built something on a solid moral foundation. That's like Rugby Strength Coach was what he previously traded under, and then Strength Coach Network, where the goods are brilliant, and then the packaging is like spicy memes on the internet so that people are more aware of it. And I think that's the way round to do it. Whereas this guy's just all flash and um, no product, or all fart and no poo, if you want to use that like classic South African line. But it's just, yeah, it just infuriates me, because I think all I see is a wake of annoyed customers who spent money on something that didn't work, and I don't think that's okay.
Yeah, and I
So yeah,
wonder how many of them are queued up to complain back to him, and how many of them that he can just like ignore slash pie off. Because if he is making 10 G's a month and he is selling 100 programs a month,
I would think we're being charitable there. But
yeah, and he's
go on.
probably just he's probably just slinging that number around. But I wonder, even if he's making $100 a month, the amount doesn't really matter. There's a queue of people in there. There's a bunch of people in there paying him. One of them has got to at least run this program and think this is bollocks. I'm going to complain. One of them, at least just one of them. And if that person does, what does he do with that? I wonder how does he honour that complaint? Because my interactions with him have been quite interesting, and something doesn't add up with this guy. Okay, and this is why I'm bringing this dude up. This isn't just like Harry and Dave.
Joining the elite club.
Yeah, we're gonna. I expect I probably
decent
will.
strength coaches that have been blocked by elite BJJ strength.
I wonder, but the reason I bring this up is because something doesn't add up, right? Something doesn't add up with this guy, and it's a lot to do with the language he uses. So he's got a lot of copy error in his material. Right? His writing does not flow, and I'm almost semi-convinced that his English is not his first language. Number one, okay, he's in the west coast of America. He's based in California. Two, is he using AI and bots and stuff like that and software on his end to get all this shit to run? And does this dude even really do jiu-jitsu? Is it even the guy that we look at on the screen? Because the way that this business is set up is very like modeled, isn't it?
Are you suggesting he's the wizard from Wizard of Oz?
Well, the Black Wizard, maybe. I don't know. Man. Something that doesn't add up with this guy. It's so weird to me. It's like a social media cookie cutter business model extracted and stuck over jiu-jitsu as a topic. And all the content is like magazine-esque, but a really poor magazine. It's information spamming. And it's almost like when I watched that chat GPT thing, type out the program like that the other day. It reminds me of that. Like this guy's using software to generate posts that he's pulled out of Seidman's book. Because I got hold of Seidman's book the other day. I was like, I want to cross-reference some of these passages. I'm pretty sure this kid has just gone copy, paste. So it just something doesn't add up. But his model, you can see how his model could make him $1,000 a month. Because there's so many people that comment BJJ in his comments list that I go and click on, and these are poor, like innocent white and blue belts, right? These are guys that don't fucking know any better, and they're willing to part with, $100, $80, whatever he's charging, and then they're getting fucked by it. That's not cool. That's not cool. If he's taking money,
for all that I'm laughing at it isn't funny, because at the bottom line there are people there who want some information and want some help. And the reason that I think this is like a moral requirement to not be a shit coach is because if you actually look into what coaches are capable of doing to people, if you fuck it up, you can really badly hurt someone. There, as excessive as it sounds, there have been deaths from student athletes in America, as an example, because they've been given a stupid program to run that was too much, that made them puke, and then they die of heat exhaustion. Now, I'm not suggesting that that's That's him. I want to be clear about that. There's no allegations around it. But shitty programming is not okay because it can do an awful lot of harm. And that's why, like, you've got like Mladen Jovanovic, you've got Will Wayland talking about the idea of and I think Kier's I mean, any decent strength coach talks about it. That first principle of first do no harm, because if all you do is don't fuck your athletes up, you are, and your clients, full stop, you're already doing better than the vast majority of, or at least a significant minority of bad PTs and bad coaches.
And you just got into the top percentile just by doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the problem. Is like, I saw that program that he'd written, and I immediately, it's hard for other people because they read it and go, oh my God, athletes must be capable of all of this, and it's so amazing. And it was written to shock someone who doesn't know any better. It's going, oh my God, this guy's great. And then all of the strength coaches look at it and go, dickhead, he's never worked with anyone. Because unless you're an Olympic, unless you're in an Olympic level sport where you have that kind of top-down control over your athlete's life and extenuating circumstances, so literally they do whatever you say, you've got the big broad picture of how you develop that person as a whole and influence their entire life, like a Russia or a China, for example, or a very, very well-established Olympic program anywhere else in the world, so that those athletes will want to do that and go, okay, that's the way, this is how we succeed. That sort of 6 days a week, multiple sessions, things back to back, it's not going to work. You've got a job, well, good luck finding the hours. And at the very best, what it's going to do is detract from your time on the mats. And ultimately, who gives a shit what you can row or deadlift if you suck at jiu-jitsu because you've spent so much time doing this? And to like make it a bit more salient, I've had a couple of people approach me about coaching before, and some of them have worked with me and some of them haven't, and we've talked about why they're interested in working with me, and they've had a run-in with a previous coach, or they've had an issue with the programming from the previous coach, and that kind of top-down, there is no flexibility, the program is the program, we do 8 days of fucking, I mean, it's American, so it's like eight days a week, even though that makes no sense. And that approach doesn't work with real human beings in the real world, except inside very specific contexts. And nothing will turn a person off working with you faster than you putting too many sessions in, which means they can't go and do the thing that they love, which is jiu-jitsu. Or you make them hate the thing that they love because you make them do it 9 times a week when actually physically they're only really capable of doing 3 decent sessions a week. And as soon as I read that, whatever that program is, I just thought, he hasn't worked with anyone, because that won't work. You cannot sustain that. If you're like 16 and mum and dad pay for everything and you're that like golden child up and comer on jiu-jitsu, then yeah, maybe, but then just be on the mats more. Why would you detract from so I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but generally, by and large, all of the strength coaches that I talk to who work with jiu-jitsu talk about the importance of having a high intensity, low volume, because you want your volume on the mats. It's minimum effective dose. It's heavy. It's teaching them decent movements, because that's where the sport isn't. You're filling in the gaps that the sport misses. It doesn't need to be CrossFit workouts, because you'll get a decent amount of energy system development from the sport until you're at a point where that's a problem, or unless you're in a position where you're gassing out within 30 seconds, or there's a specific problem that shows, yeah, this person probably needs a bit of energy systems development now. You don't want to be interfering with the thing that they enjoy. You don't want to be interfering with the sport that's highly technical, that requires an awful lot of hours and an awful lot of thought, and not just on the mats but in your own spare time. And if you're too busy, I think, were there hill sprints in that
all sorts
program?
All sorts.
Why? And it's not to detract from hill sprints. They're a wonderful tool, and I've had this pushed back on me before, where I thought it was stupid to sprint MMA fighters. I still think it's stupid to sprint MMA fighters, because I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think that the bang for your buck is, for me, because I'm not a qualified sprint coach, is necessarily worth it. Some people have some success with it. I still think unless your athlete loves sprinting, it's probably not got that much carryover. But you don't. Why would you take something so technical and so physically demanding, and then go, "Oh yeah, and we're going to chuck some hill sprints in that are technical and physically demanding"? Like it's just unnecessary when you could achieve the same ends through things that cost less in terms of tiredness.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. So if you're listening and you're thinking, well, all right, then it's easy for you to say you guys are coaches, but when I look at a post, I read the posts and then I'm sort of sucked in or whatever. How do I spot the bullshit? Well, like Dave's saying there, one element is just look at what is the total amount of work that the person is asking you to do. What are they asking you to do? Are they asking you to seriously do 7 days in a weight room / cardio room at a gym? That's not your jiu-jitsu gym. Just have a think about that. If you see suddenly loads of stuff to do every day, I'm telling you, as is Dave, it's bollocks. It's bollocks. It
Yeah,
doesn't work. All they've done really is maybe taken a professional athlete's schedule and put it down on paper and selling you the idea that that's what you should do /
yeah.
could do, which is,
I think,
again, bollocks.
so to be fair, I think something that I don't know a lot about all of it, but I think something that Owen Livesey does quite well is, um, as a former was he an Olympian? I don't know. I don't want to say
I think he was
anything
in the
bad there, but
national one. He was definitely national
he
squad for
competed at the
country.
Commonwealth Games
Yeah.
and medalled. And I can't remember what medal, and that's going to make you sound like a prick. But he's quite honest about his training. He's quite upfront about it, and it's not, "Oh, I train every day, all the day." Like it's a hell of a lot of jiu-jitsu and some strength training, and that's all. It doesn't need to become any more complicated than that. And that's someone who's like at the elite level.
Yeah.
But I just, yeah. So things to watch out for, like Harry just said. One, there are no rest days. Number one, no rest days. Fuck off. That's nonsense. One rest day, 2 rest days, perfect. If every single day is full of lots and lots of training, then yeah, that just doesn't. It's not sustainable long term. So if that's the only model that they're giving you, that's not very helpful. The second one I would say to watch out for is it just one solution? So is it all CrossFit, all kettlebells, all mace, all they've only got one modality and they're like, yeah, this is all you need. All what are they called? Supples bags or whatever it is.
Oh,
Those
supples, the old
yeah,
supple
that
bag.
kit. Yeah, and it's just those are all useful tools, but that's all they are. There's not one magic hammer that fixes everything. It's you need to know. That's where the coach comes in. They need to know where to use what and how to sort of introduce it and make it useful. So if all they're giving you is one solution and it doesn't change, then that's probably bullshit. What else? This will sound ironic for me, but be cautious if the person doesn't have any formal certifications or qualifications. It doesn't mean they're wrong. There are people out there who, unfortunately, like any industry, there are people out there who have the qualifications and certifications and they're shite. And there are people out there who don't have any of those qualifications and certifications and they're fantastic. But it should be one of the things you're looking out for. So in the UK, that's UKSCA, that's CSCS, and then that's level 4 strength and conditioning in the UK are those things. And if the person is uncomfortable with telling you where they got them from, or won't show you their certificates, or won't provide any evidence of these qualifications or certifications, that's a massive red flag. There's a time and a place for experience and weight room stuff, but you get a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I just like they're like the strength and conditioning equivalent of the jiu-jitsu guys are like, "Oh, I just learned it on the streets." You know, that guy is like, oh yeah, I'm undefeated in the streets, and then they do like get punched once in the ring and they're just crying.
Yeah.
It's the same thing where people are like, "Oh, I've lived in gyms for 30 years." And like, I worked in a pure gym with people who'd been there since the pure gym had been built, and they still didn't know how to lift a weight off the floor. Like, being in a place doesn't actually necessarily mean quality experience. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask what their actual qualifications and certifications are. don't let that put you off if they've got relevant things, or if someone can provide a decent reference for them. So like, does another coach rate them? I think that's a huge one. I don't think that gets
That's a good
pushed
one.
enough. What do other coaches think of them?
That's a
And
good one.
that's going to kind of tie into something that I wanted to talk about is um, you need to know the context of that individual. So if you're going to pay someone money, do your homework on them. Go and ask some other strength and conditioning coaches on the internet, and don't get upset if the answers you get aren't what you like, because
Right.
ultimately, all we see on Instagram is what that person wants you to see. No one puts their shit on there. No, oh, argued with a wife last night. That doesn't go up. Like, oh, fucking hate my life and have thoughts that I wish I didn't have every day. Like that's not something people generally tend to post up, particularly not if they're trying to sell you something. So I get a bit annoyed when people post up stuff from coaches where there are question marks about their personal behavior and there are question marks about their ethical behavior in business. And then you kind of point that out to people, and their pushback, and I've had this from other coaches, their pushback is, oh, well, I don't like judging people on their personal life. Well, why the fuck not? That's information you need to be able to make a decent decision about someone. And I'm not saying that that means you judge them and go, oh, I'm great and they're awful. What I mean is, if you're trying to make a decision about whether to listen to someone or not, and you don't have the knowledge to know whether what they're saying is bullshit or not, then you have to start using their context, and you have to start using, what do other people think of them? How do they conduct themselves? Do they behave in a way that's nice? If I Google their name, do I get 16 things about dodgy business dealings and accusations from people who don't like them? Because all of those are not red flags, but things that you need to be aware of. And I think sometimes people are a bit quick to take what is a useful principle one-to-one and in person, where you don't judge someone for their past necessarily. You give them a bit of time and space, and how do they behave, and have they moved on and rehabilitated and all that kind of thing. And yet at the same time, online that doesn't work, because no one builds their website going, oh, well, that business dealing I had wasn't particularly good, and I've been to prison for tax evasion, and like, those things don't come up. And generally, people who've done things like that are very, very slick talkers. And I think that, I don't know about you, but I was a bullshit artist for my teenage years. I was a total bullshit artist in my 20s when I first started teaching. And it got me to a certain point, and then I was very fortunate to have people who just pulled the rug out from underneath me and go, what the fuck are you talking about? Because you get high off your own bullshit, and you start to believe it and think you really do have the answers and that kind of stuff. And having had that experience, it makes it easier for me to go, well, they're doing that thing I used to do. Yeah, you're talking fucking bollocks. And not everyone can have that experience or that sort of ego that leads them down that path. So instead, you've got to do your research properly and just see, what do other people think of them? What do other coaches say? What do their clients say? Do I know anyone who's ever worked with them previously? And then that way you're in a much more informed position before you part with your money. Because once you've parted with your money, good luck getting it back from some of these guys.
Yeah, totally. The customer service portal is closed, and computer says no. Yeah, your
Yeah.
query will not be processed.
And now you're blocked and you can't see their profile. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Now, there's some great points there. So, what are your thoughts then, Dave, on if the qualifications slash credentials that you're inquiring about might not be everything that you'd hoped for? What about if they have skin in the game regarding, let's take jiu-jitsu as the example, because that's kind of what we're talking about. If they're a grappler themselves, do you think a coach needs to be able to grapple slash have grappling experience, or not really?
I don't think they need to. I think it can help. This is an interesting one because, as as you well know, I do not have a degree in strength and conditioning or sport and exercise science. Like, my degree was history and philosophy. I did a history masters. I was a history teacher, and then completely changed my career. So I can't really sit here and say that if someone has no qualifications, formal qualifications, that they're terrible, because then I'm throwing myself under the bus. But at the same time, skin in the game is useful. So does your coach actually lift any weights? There's nothing worse than a skinny strength coach. And that's not a criticism. I am not a massive strength coach. Some of my numbers are frankly fucking embarrassing. It's the fact that your coach tries to do it is important, because there are things you will learn about the movements, about how to teach them, about how they should feel, that you will only learn by doing. You cannot get them in a textbook. They're not there.
Yes.
But at the same time, there are high-level grapplers who suddenly think they're strength and conditioning coaches, putting out absolute dog shit, and people lap it up because they're really good grapplers.
Yes.
And they seem like nice people. And again, it's that internet thing of, oh, they seem like a nice guy, or they've really got good competition. Like, the two things aren't related. It's a bit of an example of promiscuous expertise. You're an expert in one area, that does not necessarily mean you know anything in another area.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, that's why I would say ask people to work with them, and ask other coaches whose stuff you like, or just any other strength coach or person who's into strength training, and get a feel for it. I've never found that strength coaches online are unwilling to take a little bit of time. I don't take the piss. You will get some people who's like, I'm not telling you, leave me alone. But at the same time, there are some people who are more than happy to let you know what they think of that person, or have they heard anything, or do they know anything, or does what they're saying sound like bullshit?
Yeah. I like that. Asking through your network / people that you're already in comms with, what they think. I think that's great. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway we could probably give people listening. If you're not sure how to discern who's bullshit and who's not, just start there. Literally ask other people what they think of them, other people that you respect in that field, ideally. And that's a great, easy way to start without having to critically think too hard. And then if you want to learn to critically think harder, which I strongly suggest, then get on the Navigating the Grey Area course, because that's where you'll learn all the other tools surrounding it, which can really help. Like,
Harry is once again plugging my own course for me.
Oh, always, man. I really enjoyed it. How can I not, if it means not giving my money to Elite BJJ?
Yeah, save your money there. Do my course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just put it together because, coming from history teaching, it blew my mind how many like good level coaches were doing stuff that I was like, that bollocks. What are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. This argument isn't any good. Like, just because. And I think, unfortunately, social media hasn't helped, because the way to get noticed on social media is say things that are contentious, because the algorithms like interaction. They don't care if it's positive or negative, because that's not how they've been designed. It's just, are people commenting? Yes. Then up it goes. And one way you can do that is by building an audience who engage with you and ask questions and do things. But a really easy way is to say something that really pisses people off, and then they'll all reply.
Yes.
And that makes that stopping, taking a breath, actually thinking it through, thinking about who that person is talking to, why are they saying it, that sort of stuff is really important. Particularly when this stuff's kind of leveraged to make us give our knee-jerk reaction rather than stopping. And I fall into it myself. I reply, why did I do that? Should have just put my phone down.
Yes, the cerebral and emotional bite. It's quite a fun awareness project in itself, just catching yourself wanting to bite. I do it all the time. I'm like, oh, you fucking got me. I was just about to type something. And then I catch myself about to type. I'm like, wait a second. I was like, this is contentious is the word. I'm really glad you said that. Contentious is exactly the word. That is pretty much the foundation of the fucking algorithm. Is contention to get you to bite, and now you're interacting, isn't it? It's very clever, but it can be a fun awareness game, if you like, for yourself. Just catch yourself when you're biting, and then ask yourself, what about it made you bite? Because that will give you another lesson into what the person is doing to get you to bite, and it kind of opens up a whole brain tree of kind of inquiry from there. Why? What about it made you bite? And then you can get some quite good sort of feedback doing that. I think you can put it to its use rather than just being a sucker and falling for the nonsense.
Yeah, and while I appreciate you can't go through your life, everyone knows that, or has possibly met that one person who's like, why should we go down the stairs now? Why should we do it? Just shut the fuck up. Let's be pragmatic here. We've got to get the bus. And they're like, oh, but why do buses do it? And you can't examine every single thing in your life constantly, but particularly on social media, particularly when you're looking at buying things, that's where you really ought to take your time and really think it through, because as much as we joke, it really is a little bit of Wild West out there because we're all self-employed. Like by and large, unless you have a large enough business, you haven't got a complaints department. No, it is a moral, ethical thing about whether you actually bother to deal with people properly, because you're a sole trader. So it's not necessarily very easy to actually deal with someone if they've taken your money and you're not satisfied with the product. Unlike if you were to buy it from a larger corporation or something like that. I don't know all the legal ramifications, but people can ghost you very easily online if they want to. And yeah, just don't part with your money till you've done some fucking research and thought it through.
If you're going to spend, if you're willing to spend for whatever reason, and just because you're into jiu-jitsu doesn't mean you're immune from the emotional purchase.
Yeah,
sales
definitely.
are sales, right? Sales bite down and they tap into parts of you that are impulsive and want to part with your cash. That is the moment where you've got to do your research. The moment you notice yourself wanting to part with your money because you think, oh, this is the program I need, or this person's fucking carousel post has touched a nerve and I've got to do something about it, or whatever. That's the time to ask yourself, did you just bite? Are you about to part with your money for some stupid idiot?
This guy's infographic with Nicky Rodriguez and Gordon Ryan, who he's never trained before, has really made me think this person knows about training. Yeah.
They know about training. They must know what they're talking about. And oh, yeah, those are the guys I want to be. So take my money. Yeah. Well, speaking of Gordon Ryan, I think another angle maybe we could touch on, Dave, and shed a bit of light is Gordon is doing an interesting blending of worlds right now. I think partly because of how he's learned about lifting weights with the bodybuilding world with jiu-jitsu. He is obviously a fan of bodybuilding. That's his main kind of training style. I think mostly passed to him from his girlfriend, and he's doing a good job on marketing at least to that world and vice versa. However, why might, and this really opens up a whole interesting discussion, but why might trying to do what Gordon does in the gym without the assistance of Mexican milkshakes and various needle thicknesses not go to plan for someone who's a recreational grappler, a semi-pro grappler, even a pro grappler, but just you're not juicing and you're not training 70 times a week? Maybe you could shed a bit of light on that, because I can guarantee some people, when that's already happening, are going, I'm going to train like Gordon Ryan because that's going to make my jiu-jitsu better. And I get where they've got that from. I can see how they've joined the dots, but maybe why is that not so smart?
Well, I think there's a few things. The first one is, as you pointed out with your post about it, Gordon's an outlier. Like, Gordon is up there with Hodger Gracie and the greats as just holy shit. And they're just my coach once described rolling with Hodger years ago as trying to wrestle with your dad when you're 6. And my coach is not a small man. And he was like, I knew what he was doing. I'd studied his game for years because I loved the way that he competed. He was like, I thought maybe I'd be able to do something. And it was just, no. He was like, oh, he's done it again. Oh, he's done it again. Like he said in one roll, he submitted probably 6 times in a row. And then Hodger started being a bit nicer to him because he was just, and it's, I'm not saying that that's a sign of, oh, Hodger's great because he beat my coach up. What I mean is, outliers are better than you could even imagine ever being at anything in your entire life. And it's not fair and it sucks and it makes you want to go and cry. But that's the reality of it. Like, I had the same thing when I did history. There were people I met and I was just like, fuck, I'm just not as good at history as you are. Like, I could make every day about this and nothing else. And I might be able to like be up there with you, but you'd still be smarter than me. And if you started working like I did, I'd be blown out of the water again.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the problem, is outliers exist, and trying to copy them is generally not a good idea, because the vast majority of people in that top level of sport are not there because they copy Gordon Ryan. There are different ways to that. So yeah, number one, you're not Gordon, so that's not necessarily going to do it. Number two, because Gordon is an outlier, he would be that good doing CrossFit. You could pick whatever modality you want, and as long as it didn't take away from his time on the mats, he'd still be the best in the world, largely. His strength training has nothing to do with it. Because if you look at him before he started taking all this training seriously, he was already competing very well at a high level.
Yeah.
Back when they show those pictures of him being scrawny, and he's not
Yeah.
really scrawny, it's just by comparison to his pictures now. I think the other thing as well is, like, Gordon is not as big as people think he is, and that's something he's quite honest about in some of the podcasts. That's they make sure they take a picture after he's just worked out, so it's like a full pump. He wasn't even the biggest in the weight category at ADCC,
Right.
because he's not going to be. He just needs to be big enough to be in that division and be able to compete.
Yeah.
And he's so good that it didn't matter that he wasn't as big or as strong, because he's not trading on that. He's trading on the fact that he is technically more capable, and squeeze strength, he happens to be very strong, but he's not quick. He's not explosive. He's not any of those things that you would look at for another sport. It just happens that he's picked the right sport. He's invested it in the right places with the right coach at the right time in his life. And the other one is, you're not a pro grappler who's making literally millions of dollars passively through the instructionals that you release on a pretty easy basis and doing seminars. And that's not to say Gordon's life is easy. Like, training's fucking hard. And I imagine training with Dana is brutal.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have a job. He doesn't need to worry about, like, can he pay rent? Like, he's there. He's got the money. He's fine.
Yeah, he's sorted.
And trying to emulate what he's doing now, that's not even what he did when he started. Like, that's the last point. He's built up to this point. He didn't just come in and start training like Flex Lewis. No. Like, he will have gradually got himself to that point as well. But yeah, so the big one is the training volume is just too high. I would be surprised if most people with a job could sustain the kind of training volume that Gordon does just on the mats. Partly because of time, but partly because you just have other stresses and other difficulties in your life that you're going to have to recover from that he hasn't.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about mat volume alone. And then another interesting, I think, angle to that is then, the gym volume on top. So if you look at what Gordon does training-wise, let's talk on a sort of session-by-session basis. He does a lot of volume in the weight room. He does a lot of reps and a lot of sets and a lot of different exercises to hit similar or same muscle groups. So very much a classic sort of bodybuilding style. Now, let us tell you from experience and study and all the rest of it, if you try and train like 5 to 6 sets of 20 on 2 chest exercises without taking steroids and doing jiu-jitsu, it's not going to last very long before injury, burnout, or both. It's going to be very, very difficult without gear to handle that number of sets and reps. Now, when you're juicing, everything changes. Everything changes of what you can get away with. And one of the things you can get away with, as far as I understand it, because I don't juice to compete or to train, is you can do a lot more volume, that style of training, 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of 15, 20, 30 reps. And that style of training favors the new hormone concoctions you've got going through your body. But as soon as you take that drug element out of it, which is the elephant in the room in the jiu-jitsu world, really, the training has to change. And I like what you said earlier, as that can really be summarized quite simply as higher intensity and much lower volume. That's the way to think about it. So for layman's terms, that's your lower reps, less kind of sets in total, longer rest times, and then short workouts in the weight room. We're not in the weight room 2.5 hours. Some of those bodybuilding workouts are savage. I'm not going to take anything away from the output there. A 2.5 hour workout, I mean, past the sick bucket, like brutal. But as soon as you're off the gear, that's not going to happen. And the higher intensity, lower volume, that's the way to think about it. If you're listening and you want to discern, well, should I be doing still what Gordon does in the weight room, even if I'm not Gordon Ryan on the mats? No, don't do the bodybuilding stuff. Like, unless you want to experiment and do gear, do whatever. But if you're not doing that, and that's not how you want to supplement your training, stay away from that stuff. It'll fuck you up real quick.
The other thing as well is, like, Gordon has thrived in a very high volume, high intensity jiu-jitsu room. There's potential that part of how he's an outlier is and this is often the phrase that's used by not just Gordon, but just athletes in general who are like, "Oh, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the biggest, I was just the hardest worker," and that's very important, and that does set people apart. But perhaps that's his genetic gift is being able to tolerate a higher volume than a lot of other people can. So, like, what makes someone a marathon runner? They can tolerate more volume. Their body's just okay with it. Or what makes a marathon runner high level rather than just intermediate? And it may not be, but it might be that even before he was taking steroids, he could. And he's been quite open about this. People think you're being shady when you're like Gordon's on steroids. He has joked in the past that he is as what was it? He's as clean as everyone else at the top level of the sport. There you go. He's not being dishonest, but he has to be cautious about openly saying I'm on steroids because it's illegal to take them in America. Whereas in the UK, people are often a bit more honest because it's not illegal to take them. It's illegal to buy and sell. Sorry, it's illegal to sell them. So I think you get that a lot in the fitness community in America, where people will be openly dishonest because they're admitting a crime if they say that they do. In the UK, it's often more honest because you're not admitting a crime. You're admitting a crime if you sell it. You're not admitting a crime if you say that you're taking.
Interesting. Yeah, I can totally believe that mixes into the professional opinion, the public relations, the whole lot, right? I'm sure it does. Like even with the Liver King, with all of them, it's you can't say it outright, you can't say it blatantly. So yeah, the juicing changes everything, guys. Bodybuilding, it's not the one to accompany. What is interesting with Gordon is that he does train in a style that, arguably caters to slow twitch bodies quite nicely. So I'll give him that, and I think that's by accident. Personally, I think that's a coincidence, but it works out, quite well. Like you say, I think it's a personality trait that he likes volume. I think he's durable in that way, and he's got the perfect concoction plus a savage work ethic on top, and it's pretty fucking impressive. So in my eyes, he can do whatever the fuck he wants and juice and whatever. But for everybody that wants to try and follow in his shoes, just don't do it quite exactly. Yeah, don't do that. There's much better ways that will help you on the training front, I would say.
Yeah. Well, you sent me that YouTube video. He probably teenager, I'd say, maybe early 20s at best.
It's under 25 for sure.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, here's how I did Gordon's thing. And then it seemed to just evolve into him talking about competition footage. But there were a few issues with it. One, he spent $150 on Gordon's bodybuilding Bible. Right, there are cheaper, better resources on that. Two, he then tried to claim that the way he'd be able to tell if it had helped him with jiu-jitsu was based off his jiu-jitsu performance at a competition, which he won. But there's so many confounding factors there. Like that's just nonsense. It's not as simple as if it was, this would be the easiest job in the world.
Agreed. That's a really important point. That's a really important point.
And the other thing that people often miss is when you are a total novice and you've never been in the weight room before, anything works because you've never done a thing. So I think it's, I don't know where it's come from, but the person I heard say it first was Dan John, where he says, everything works for about 6 weeks. And the skill of the coach is in finding out what works for longer than 6 weeks. And then how do you keep those 6 weeks going and going and going? And I think a lot of people, that resonated with me because that was something I struggled with years ago when I was just trying to kind of figure things out and do 5-3-1 and didn't understand about like sport volume and life stress and all of that and how those things play into each other. It's well-meaning and it's fantastic that kid's in the weight room. And it's really good that he's noticed that, if you don't do anything, you're probably going to feel an advantage to the fact that you're actually lifting some weights. But there was something in there. He said, like, Gordon says he doesn't do legs because then it gets harder to lock up triangles.
Yes.
Now, I haven't got the biggest legs in the world by any means, and I'm not detracting. If you have like bodybuilders' legs, maybe that is the case. But I love a triangle, and I've never had that be an issue of locking it up. If anything, it's made the triangle more brutal for people. So I don't understand that logic at all, if I'm completely honest. I've heard a different argument that it comes from B team, so they might just be taking the piss. But I've heard leg lockers talk before about not wanting to train legs because it becomes slightly easier to escape or put your legs into positions where it's harder to control if you have smaller legs. Whereas in a way, it's easier if the other person has bigger legs. But I'm shit at leg locks, so I don't understand how all of that works or whether that's really the case. But that's allegedly why some of the B team guys don't train legs. But then Nicky Rod's got massive fucking legs and doesn't seem to have any issues there. So
Yeah, that's interesting. You do notice a bit more of a V taper to a lot of grapplers, and
yeah,
whether that's by accident or design, but I think a large part is that's because the hands are so highly involved in getting
yeah,
the process going. Right? It's pulling, yeah, it's pulling
yeah.
that creates that.
Same as climbers.
Totally. And climbing,
Yeah,
you could argue, okay, there's a verticality component now, so you don't want to have legs, you want to have cocktails. It's gymnastics too. I've heard the gymnasts talk about on rings, but then you still, as a system, you need them, right? They're attached to you. So it's like you can't just really like spot train, spot fat burn. It's like we are linked. Like we're linked
yeah,
as a setup for kind of a reason. So I can kind of see what they mean in the bro science perspective, but from a training perspective, I think training legs to get, at least just systemically stronger is vital if
yeah.
you're a grappler, personally.
But I think it also speaks a lot. I nearly said speaks volumes, and that felt a little bit too on the nose. But I think that says a lot about Gordon's understanding of training.
Totally.
That strength training equals size, and for him, that's what he wanted, so that he could move up into different weight categories.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
that is not the case.
No.
There are ultra marathoners who do strength training because it's good for their body. They don't want size because if you want to win ultra marathons, you want to be as light as fucking possible and as durable as possible. There are ways to do that without putting on loads of extra mass. Otherwise, like I just think it says a lot when you go, I don't train legs because I don't want them to get big. Okay, well, one, why? Two, you can train your legs without making them enormous. That's perfectly possible. Like otherwise, every guy who's ever been in a gym would have like Tom Platt style. None of them would be able to buy trousers. Like, and that's just not the case. It's like when people say that old thing of, oh, I don't want to get too big. You're like, don't worry. Well, some of us are trying and it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, you won't. You don't have any idea what it would take to get that big, even without enhancement, and to stay there.
Yeah.
Especially doing a sport like jiu-jitsu, which just rips it off you anyway.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Now, I thought, yeah, I mean, look, credit to the kid. We're talking about a video from a kid on YouTube who just, bought Gordon's program for an obscene amount of money, but
and then said, oh, it's much cheaper than his other instructionals. I was thinking, it is, but his other instructionals are much better quality.
this kid's fucking glass is half full, whatever the day, isn't it? But he does the program or whatever. He puts on a bit of muscle because he's already a rake as it is, and then wins a comp. And the classic correlation equals causation. Just therefore this has all worked great because I medalled. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm stoked you medalled, mate, but I don't think it's quite as simple as that. So that's the pitfalls you've got to kind of watch out for. Is again just following in the outliers' footsteps, but especially if you're a beginner in the weight room, like Dave says, anything's going to work really. And whether that's doing bodybuilding stuff, whether that's doing more barbell strength training, whether that's whatever it is, push-ups, hundreds of push-ups, anything, it's just going to work because your body ain't used to it, so it's going to get shocked. After that, but it's burnout recipe.
It kind of ties into that thing we were saying about qualifications. Like, why would you listen to Gordon about anything other than jiu-jitsu? He's phenomenally qualified to talk about jiu-jitsu. He's overwhelmingly underqualified to talk about much else. Like jiu-jitsu, how to sell instructionals, how to do seminars, like that sort of stuff, absolutely. But that's a person who dedicated their entire life from, was it 14, something like that?
I think something like that.
To just jiu-jitsu, no like school, nothing. So why would you assume that he would know about lifting weights? Because that's a secondary hobby. That's not where he makes his money. That's not where he's successful.
Yeah.
He hasn't got any qualifications. Neither does his girlfriend outside of training other bodybuilders and things like that. And I don't know enough about her to say anything there. It's just that that's her area of expertise. So that's not strength training, that's physique training, and it's not the same thing. And that's not to say that he'd be better if he strength trained either. Like, he's that much of an outlier. He'd be exactly the fucking, like, he could not train at all, not train outside of jiu-jitsu at all, and he'd probably still be, maybe not in the weight categories that he was, but he'd still be like one of the best in the world at least.
Yeah, and that's it. You've got to remember, isn't it? It's a large part of what he does is because his frame weight is a lot leaner than what he sits at. So he has to juice and he has to pump up to stay there. It's that simple.
Particularly if he's been having those eating problems and his digestive. Anyway,
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's a whole lot more than just meets the eye there with the sports performance side of this. Question, we had to have some good ones actually. Let's start with. Ooh, yeah, go on then. Let's go there because we got a chance. This comes from Dev. Nice one, Dev, sending this one. Thoughts on Phil Daru and being fired from American top team, or his generic information he tries to peddle? Oh, fantastic. Nice one, Dev. What do you reckon then, Dave? Mr. Phil Daru Strong.
I would. There's an awful lot I could say here, but I will start with I've never had any dealings with him. I don't know him. I've never done any of his courses. I don't like the information he puts out because I don't think it's genuine. In terms of, I don't think he's being authentic when he puts it out. I do think, as Geoffrey Chiu has pointed out, he has been a boon for us because it's made people aware of strength and conditioning in MMA in particular. I think what Masvidal said about him specifically and name checking him in an interview that was so negative says everything that personally I feel like I need to know. Because if you've got to the point where you've pissed off the athletes that you work with so much that they're willing to go and talk to the MMA media and name check you, when really in the grand scheme of things, strength and conditioning coaches are kind of backroom staff. You know, you're not, the strength and conditioning coach is not the number one person that the fighter thanks after the fight. You might be on that list, but it's going to be technical coaches. It's going to be, you know, their family. It's going to be all the rest of it. So it's not like people and journalists are sitting on the edges of their seats wanting to know, what do these MMA fighters think of their strength and conditioning coach? So the fact that Masvidal has gone out there to specifically say something negative about him says an awful lot. I think there were also some slightly more subtle statements made by some of the coaches at American top teams shortly after as well that you can find if you look for them. I think so for those who don't know, what Masvidal accused him of was offering sessions for fighters for free that he didn't really train, and then videoing those sessions in a way that implied that he trained them regularly. Now, I don't know whether that's the case. Again, this is the guy who sucker punched Colby Covington, so take it with a pinch of salt. But if you've got to the point where you've managed to upset people in that stable enough for them to go out of their way to say something, then at the very least your ability to manage relationships with your clients isn't necessarily as good as it could be. And that's a warning sign for me. I from what I have read of what he puts out, I don't really think much of it, and I think I know a few people who've done his mentorship and they've been underwhelmed, but that doesn't mean that it may just have not been the right fit for them. And I'm pulling my punches here and being quite polite because I don't want to get taken to court over libel. But yeah, I don't think he is as good as at the strength and conditioning side as he is at the marketing side. But I definitely think he's a better coach than Elite PJJ Strength in that he's actually coached some athletes.
Yeah, totally.
So this is, sorry, that actually, well, I'm interrupting you there, but that ties into another thing that people can use really easily. I think the number one thing to look out for, whether your coach is full of shit or not, is the process about them or is the process about you? And my number one issue with the way that Phil presents himself online is it's about him.
Right.
for example, his face is on all of his tour posters for his seminars. And I appreciate that you need to kind of have your face somewhere, but for me, it's about the athletes. For me, it's about putting their process first. It's not about your coach and your coach's feelings and I have the best program ever and all of that. It's how can I help you? What do you want from this? It should be client and athlete centered, not coach centered. And I think that's a big one.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting one as well to look at what people's kind of lineage is in jiu-jitsu. Obviously, we do this all the time. When someone says they're a black belt, it's out of interest. Okay, what was the lineage? You can literally follow the family black belt tree back in time. Well, strength coaching, you can, if you do your research, you can kind of do something similar, right? And I think what's interesting with Daru is he really was just a spin-off of the West Side world, from what I understand. The spin-off off of Louis Simmons, i.e. he did some sort of certification with them, some sort of training with them, some sort of internship. But he did a stint, from what I understand, in the West Side world, and has done a good job at building what looks like to be a successful business in the S&C world for combat sports across a lot of the areas. But I think you're right. The giveaway is that it's Daru centric. It's the way that his media and the way his marketing is presented. It's much more of the celebrity coach feel, where the coach is the star, like you say, rather than putting the athletes first. So yeah, that's really interesting. It's mostly regurgitated sort of conjugate method with look at my face, I'm Phil Daru's stamp on it.
Yeah, although I have realised that it's a little ironic considering quite a lot of my posts recently have been me talking to my phone. So if you went through my feed, there's an awful lot of me going.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we're in a people kind of service world, right, where we communicate with people. So that has to come from us and our mouths at some point. But it's the way it's portrayed. You can tell when someone loves their reflection or not. You can just tell.
Yeah.
And I don't mean love in the sort of more normal self-love appreciation. I mean the vanity element of like they want to be in the limelight. It's a giveaway, and you can see as an overview to Daru as an entity, as a kind of pseudo celebrity strength coach. So that's how it is. That's how he presents himself, and that is, through one set of goggles, a little bit of a warning sign. Perhaps the smoke and mirrors to overshadow the fact that his content maybe isn't all that. It's quite an interesting case. There was another one, question-wise then. Let's have a quick little look here. I guess on that note, what would your top 5 current S&C coaches in combat sports be?
I love this. It feels like one of those like listicles or something, like top 5 strength and conditioning coaches you must have heard of. Like,
yes, a little blog post.
I don't know about top 5. I just think there's an awful lot of people out there who are doing great things with their athletes, and they've all got different approaches. So I'm not listing in any order, and I will miss out an enormous number of people, I'm sure, because I did a post a little while ago, at the end of 2022, or a story mentioning a lot of people, and then I got a few coaches messaging me going, "Why wasn't I on that list?" And it's like, "Oh, fuck, sorry, yeah." So if you're in the UK, I think some excellent people. I mean, I'm going to have to mention Will Wayland first, and I have to give that a little caveat because he's my friend. He has been my mentor, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. So I will always be biased in that respect. And just as a slight aside, everyone's fucking biased about everything, so that's fine. It's not a bad word, but I will always put Will up there because I think he's been doing this since 2009. He was 2009, 2010. He was writing on the Scramble blog about what to do to strength train for jiu-jitsu. He's worked with numerous people who've got into the UFC. And the thing there is, because I've had some people go, "Oh, well, it's not who you work with." He's worked with them since they were amateurs, and they still work with him now that they're in the UFC. And I think that's a big one: is can they maintain that relationship? Can they program for someone at all those levels? So yeah, I think Will's fantastic. He's very kind with his time. He puts an awful lot of information out there. He has a mentorship, but that's very recent. That was like last year he launched that. yeah, go and check his page out because there's so much stuff. He's on Instagram as Powering Through, um, because they have the Powering Through Performance Centre down in Chelmsford. So yeah, I would say Will first. Chris Miah is an excellent one. Chris Miah, MMA, is an MMA fighter. Um, yeah, Chris has been really kind with his time. He's given me some really helpful pushback on things that I thought were a bit shit, but didn't really understand why. And actually was like, no, in these circumstances, I think they're useful, and here's why. And that's nice. Like, you won't get anything but honesty with Chris. Um, Brotherhood Performance. So Andrew, who runs that, is fantastic as well. He's a jiu-jitsu competitor who also has his strength and conditioning business. Yeah, at the moment he's been putting quite a bit out about. He's got a really nice series actually about jiu-jitsu injuries that he's done with another guy called Birdman Strength, who I don't know anything about, so I can't say there. But they've done I think 3 so far about like the major things you're likely to get injured from and how the injury mechanics work and stuff, which is really cool. Trying to think who else. Geoff Chiu, so I think it's at GCPT. You know Jeffrey better than I do, but yeah, Jeffrey's fantastic. He's been in and around this for a very long time, and is a very, very thoughtful guy. He's got a book. Is it the Combat Sports Strength Training Manual or something like that? I'm probably butchering the title, but it's
Essentials of S&C for combat.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. It's very good. That was very helpful to read when I was first starting to do all of this. I found that really helpful. Well, who else can I upset by leaving them off? Terrence, so in America, Terrence Kennell, I think. I always want to say Kennelly, but I don't think it is. I think it's Kennell. He works at the UFC Performance Institute now. He's worked in basketball and baseball, and he's really kind with his time. His Instagram probably isn't worth checking out because, as he jokes every time, if you follow me on here for strength and conditioning stuff, you're not getting any. He does occasionally put the odd post out, but he's I think he's probably going to be writing some stuff about this in the future, but he's very good. Who else? Oh, Marcus Cable is excellent. He's the strength. He did the course with you, Marcus, who was on Navigating the Grey Area. He's now the head strength and conditioning coach at Drake over in Wales.
Yes, wicked. Okay, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, he put some stuff out as well. But there's plenty of others. There's Crusader Strength. There's who else have I missed? I'll probably think of about 6 more people. But the point is, I don't know about top 5. I'm unsurprisingly going to put Will near the top because he's just had such a huge influence on the way that I do things. But there are an awful lot of excellent strength coaches out there. If you're looking for something as a coach for other resources, the Strength Coach Network is fantastic. But yeah, those people are all great, but have a look around. I'm sure there's other people that I've missed off, and there's people that I've forgotten about. And obviously Harry as well. Hey. But yeah, there's a whole wealth of people. And if you ask one of us, we'll send you other profiles that you can look at and people that you can talk to. And if people don't, that's another red flag, because it means they're afraid of losing you to someone else, which means they're not doing that well and they don't have the right mindset. Like, I'm happy to share who I think is good, but I think it's drastically improved in the last few years. I think there's a lot of, because we've got a lot of strength coaches taking up jiu-jitsu. So I think as a result, they're recognizing that there's a gap there. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I agree. It's you can see why a strength coach brain would like jiu-jitsu and vice versa. It's cool that they're crossing over more and more. And I agree. Yeah, there's some great coaches out there that are really helping everything, push forward, and they're conscientious and pushing stuff forward with like good moral value, good awareness of what they're putting out there. It's well thought out. You've got to maybe dig a little bit deeper to find them than the surface level algorithmic charlatans filling your feed, or at least that's what my feed is full of these days. So
you need to curate your feed, my friend. Don't do that to yourself.
although I like to keep an eye on it, Dave. You know what I mean?
Okay, fair enough. That would just make me want to throw my phone out the window. Yeah, the other one as well. One more rule for checking this stuff out. Do they have any video of them training athletes or clients? Because if they don't, and I appreciate some people run their business in a way where they don't really show a lot of that, but they should. There should be evidence of them coaching. There should be social proof that people actually work with them in person.
That's a very good point, mate, because instruction and messaging, being the messenger and just delivering information from wherever the fuck you got the information from to whoever you're showing it to is not the same as developing someone.
Well, it's not teaching.
It's not teaching, it's just
It's
relaying.
writing a Wikipedia entry. It's not the same.
Totally. And on the surface, it can look like, wow, this person is demonstrating an exercise. How competent, how brilliant. Surely then they must be ... It's not always the case. Is there footage? Yeah, very, very good, of them working with other people, other athletes, interacting on more than just this is how you do X video, because that's there's a big difference there, even though on the surface you might not think. Yeah, very, very cool, Dave. Well, this has been a great chat, mate. I've got a jet because I've got to go and teach class tonight.
Very nice.
For all those that are not in the pub, respect to you training on a Friday night, because I know where I'd rather be. No, I'm just kidding. I love doing that. It's a wicked little class. This has been a great chat, Dave. I'd like to do more of these, mate, if time permits.
Yeah, definitely. I'm up for that.
Yeah, definitely do a Have I Got News for You monthly roundup of all the bollocks out there and all the good stuff too.
Yeah, people can send it in to us.
Yeah, please do.
Have you seen on the internet?
Yeah, please do. And I was going to say that actually, just for giggles, if you're listening, get on the Elite BJJ Strength page and just comment BJJ on everything that he posts, and just get him to DM you and start, ping us some screenshots, would you? Because he denied my invitation to the podcast, by the way, guys. I eventually got a reply from him. Last night I sent him a message saying, Christian, which I believe is his real name, you're leaving me on scene, bro. You're killing me, because he had left my messages on scene. So lots of crying emojis. And then eventually he got back to me and said, doing a podcast is not in my future. Knuckles emoji. And I was like, okay. And he's officially pied off my request to come on the show. So,
well, you need to watch out for when he goes on a podcast. You're going to be like, what the fuck, man? I thought that was never in your future. Come on.
You'll see him on Huberman next week. This has been a great run-in, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, check out Foundations Performance on Instagram and make sure you book on for Navigating the Grey Area end of January if you want to not get duped by the turd merchants out there. Dave, it's been a pleasure. We will get you back on soon.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.